Previously on the Sugar Baby Confessionals.
I feel like I have the power 100%. On the surface of it, it looks as if a sugar daddy has the upper hand. But if that sugar baby doesn't want to participate, then he's just a man with a lot of money and his dick in his hand. Even if that man was willing to give me an allowance 10 times what I wanted, I still wouldn't be able to bring myself to kiss him. I'm looking to be dominated. Hearing about what I get up to with a sugar daddy, it excites him so much. It just pulls out this kind of primal beast that just wants to ravish me. And I just laid everything out on the table for him, all of my deepest, darkest secrets. And he loved me anyway.
Welcome back to the Sugar Baby Confessionals, the podcast charting my friend Ruby's journey into the world of sugar babying. This week, we're catching up on Ruby's shenanigans with the Brit and discussing religion. Yep, we're going to go there, so buckle up, people. There are also going to be graphic descriptions of DIY bondage. So if you find yourself being dangerously turned on by the idea of ropes, pulleys, and light smacking, I'd skip most of the first part of the episode. So, with our theme being religion, we're going to be looking at whether, in this context, sex is divine or degrading. If you've been listening up to this point, I think you'll know by now where Ruby and I stand. To hark back to the Milton quote from the second episode, to the pure, all things are pure, to the impure, all things are impure, Ruby and I are going to continue to explore the world in between. The theme today is religion, but we'll start off with a bit of a recap. So how have you and Favorite Person been?
I'd have to say overall we're doing quite well. We did go through a little bit of a rough patch because there were certain things that I was doing that was upsetting him, and he's kind of one of these old school guys that have feelings but doesn't quite understand where they're coming from all the time. So it took a little bit of kind of poking and prying on my part to get it all to come out and to discuss it, which we did. So now I have a much clearer understanding of what Favorite Person feels comfortable with, what he doesn't, which, makes a lot of sense. And this is a totally new journey for both of us. So obviously there are going to be certain boundaries and we need to figure out what those are, in some sense, almost as we go along, you know? Because something I'm going to think, I'll think it's reasonable and I'll be comfortable with it, but then he won't, and vice versa. Something that he's comfortable with, I'm going to say, well, hold on, wait a minute. And you don't really know that until you get there and you experience it. Yeah.
What was the...
Well, I think as his relationship with his girlfriend is unfolding and my relationship with the Brit is unfolding, because he's by far and away, my favorite, we're finding that I like the Brit more than he likes his girlfriend. So there's a little bit of an imbalance there in terms of how much time we want to spend with that other person. And that was making Favorite Person uncomfortable. So I would send a text, let's say, or be texting with the Brit in the evening. And this would really irritate Favorite Person because he's like, well, this is supposed to be my quality time.
You said that there's an imbalance. So does that mean, for example, you're like, got a date with the Brit on Tuesday and Thursday and also might want to see him on Sunday, for example, and he's been like, well, I only want to see my girlfriend once a week. Does that mean I'm stuck here with the kids, twice? Is it that kind of thing, or?
Yeah, that kind of thing. I mean, I haven't asked to see the Brit quite that often, but I certainly am happy to see him more often than Favorite Person wants to see his girlfriend. I would definitely be happy seeing the Brit more than once a week, but Favorite Person is not happy for me to see the Brit more than once a week, so I only see him once a week. But that's something that we needed to talk about, which is fine. I mean, ultimately, I want to make sure the Favorite Person feels like my favorite person, he needs to feel my love for him and the fact that he is still the most significant and important person in my life. So I want to know what it is that would upset him so that I can avoid doing it.
So how did you resolve the issue?
Once I got him to actually tell me what it was that he was upset about. So for instance, the texting. he made it clear to me, like, between this time and this time, this is, when I feel like it's my quality time with you and I really don't want your mind with someone else. And I said, okay. So now from, let's say, 5 o'clock in the evening until about 10 o'clock at night, I avoid sending text messages to the Brit. I mean, that's a really easy, like, little guideline to follow.
Do you think it could lead to problems if you're sort of sneaking to the bathroom to have a little text or to respond to something from the Brit?
Well, it definitely would. And I could understand that. I mean, I wouldn't want to be treated the same way, in the reverse. So I just don't do that.
Throughout this episode, you may hear Ruby scratching away with a pencil. She likes making mandala pictures during our talks. A mandala comes from Indian culture and these days just means any symbol or drawing that is meant to represent the cosmos. The internet tells me it means wholeness or a cosmic diagram that reminds us of our relation to the infinite, the world that extends both beyond and within our bodies and minds. I know what you're thinking. This shit just got a whole lot deeper than you thought it would.
Well, sorry, I can stop. See, I just have to figure out what the boundaries are.
That was fairly painless.
I want to make my people feel loved and happy, so I'm easy.
I know from experience that often happens with myself and my husband, because I've always been used to drilling down through different layers, and I'm quite happy to look at what can be quite counterintuitive subconscious, reasons for things. But as soon as I start talking about the subconscious, my husband's like, "Oh, don't bloody psychoanalyze me now."
Oh, really?
Yeah, he's got like a sort of a mental block about that kind of thing. So I have to be.
Do you have to couch it the right way?
Yes, exactly. I have to find the right words.
You can't use psychological jargon.
No, but we've talked about this before, and the book that you suggested, Love Languages, really helped with that, because I think that was a very practical way of presenting.
Yeah, and that doesn't have any kind of psychological jargon at all.
No. But that's why I think it was easier to talk to him about feelings and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Because it was so simple. Your favorite person, he's very smart, he's very good with philosophical concepts. He's one of when he talks about philosophy and stuff, I feel pretty dumb.
No, not at all. Furthest thing from dumb. Listen, I mean, over the years he's gotten better. I attribute this whole what are emotions? I don't know what you're talking about. I attribute that to his upbringing. He's the youngest of 3 boys, went to an all-boys school. His father loves to say things like cowboys don't cry. It's like stupid crap like that. So over the years, he's definitely gotten a lot better. I think when something happens and it really touches a very tender spot, his immediate reaction is to just defend against that. And he just shuts down. That's his defense mechanism. He just tries to, and this is all totally subconscious, but he just tries to pretend that nothing has happened. But obviously, something is actually really bothering him. So over the years of us being together, I've really figured out when something is bothering him. I know sometimes when something's bothering him before he knows that something's bothering him. And even though it can be very exhausting, I am committed to just poking at it and getting him to talk until sometimes it's almost as if he stumbles upon the reason, like by accident almost. So that was the process that we had to walk through when going through these couple little hiccups about the Brit. Obviously it is a really sensitive topic. I mean, we're talking about someone that I'm really fond of and physically intimate with. So it's yeah, that's probably about as tender as you can get.
But, he didn't seem to have these reactions to other sugar daddies.
No, he hasn't at all. It's specifically because the Brit is someone that I genuinely care about.
And he knows that because you've been honest with him about how you feel.
Yes.
The thing is, have you sort of been kind of the Brit said this, and he told me this really funny joke? Or is it like, wow, when we were on the beanbag the other night and, it's crunching away, nothing quite, it's the best thing I've ever, experience, also that is it that kind of, like, which aspect of it is it more the sort of emotional intimacy that he minds, or the physical intimacy?
It's definitely the emotional stuff. That's the part that makes him feel like, ooh, let's be careful here. Like, you're actually my wife. You're not somebody else's girlfriend, which I can understand. I don't have an issue with that whatsoever. And to just reiterate, I mean, I don't have an issue with any of the boundaries that favorite person has asked for either. I just needed to know what they were.
So is it sorted out now? I mean,
I think so. I hope so. It's been a little while since you and I have chatted with each other,
yeah,
Esty. So
yeah.
yeah, and since then we probably had, I'd say, 3 days worth of not constant fighting, but just the topic coming up, because there was still more to unpack and talk about and dig a little deeper and flesh it out and so on and so forth. And I think once the end of those 3 days was up, we both felt so much better. Since then, knock on wood, it's been fine. It's been really good, actually.
So tell me about what you and the Brit have been up to. Last time you said you were thinking about going exclusive with him. Did you do that, or?
Yes and no. So basically, what I've decided to do is continue seeing Mankini. I've seen him one more time, but I'm not really interested in like finding another sugar daddy. I probably do have the time in my schedule. So I don't think the issue for favorite person is necessarily like, oh, I only want you to go out one night a week. I probably go out more than one night a week if it was with a different person. So Mankini's kind of sticking around just because he's almost like grandfathered in. And also, I mean, we only see each other once a month. He doesn't expect a lot from me. So, in fact, I was chatting with favorite person about this the other day after I saw Mankini again. He doesn't actually feel like a sugar daddy. The Brit feels like a sugar daddy. He feels more like a client. Like, I feel like I'm like an escort with him. You ask about his life and, what problems he's having and so on and so forth.
Describe the encounter with Mankini.
Well, we went to the same hotel that he booked the first time. So I've only seen him twice. We met in the lobby and walked up to the room together, and just poor man. I mean, immediately I saw such a huge change in him. Like, he's gained weight. The way he was dressed was a bit kind of floppy, and his sweater had cat hair all over it. It wasn't very appealing, and he just has these really dark circles under his eyes. I could tell he was totally stressed out, So this is the guy who used to be a financial director for quite a large company, and he decided to quit his job and open up his own company. So it's the beginning stages of him being an entrepreneur, and I mean, I can't even imagine all the things he's having to tackle. So we went up to the room together, and he was quite sweet. He had a huge bouquet of roses for me and a bottle of champagne. It's like so
That's very
thoughtful.
sweet, considering that he's paying you as well. It's sort of like,
I know.
It's a done deal. You know what I mean? It's not like he has to convince you.
Yeah, there's no wooing here.
Spoiler alert, you're getting laid.
But that's the thing. The first time that we met each other, he also had champagne with him and a bar of my favorite chocolate, So he's obviously just a really sweet person. Like, I like him, even though I'm not terribly turned on by him, if that makes sense.
Were you like, the first thing we're going to do is whip off that cat hair jumper?
Yeah, I didn't say that out loud, but I think that your commentary was, verbatim in my mind as we were getting undressed. Like, I picked it up with 2 fingers and dropped it in the corner of the room.
Boom, chicka, meow, meow. Okay, I regret that immediately.
So we didn't have a lot of time. The thing about Mankini, if you remember, is that he's married. His wife does not know about me. So he can only meet in the middle of the day. And because of my schedule, like, driving kids back and forth to school, we only had 2 hours together. It was a very short time. Kind of felt like a long time to me. But I'm sure, in fact, he said, like, oh, is it, 4 o'clock already? I can't believe it. The time went so quickly. And I'm like, yeah.
Wow. Hey.
Yeah, it did. It went really fast. It was a lot of hugging and kissing. I think we kissed for just 2 hours straight, actually. A lot of caressing, holding him. Unfortunately, he still couldn't get an erection. Actually, he got an erection when I gave him a blowjob, but whenever it comes time to like try to push into me, he just immediately goes soft again. So technically speaking, we've never had penetrative sex.
There must be something that he's dealing with. Have you asked him? Have you tried to probe, or are you just kind of like, well, I'm not here to psychoanalyze, I'm just gonna...
I don't ask about what's making him nervous. I feel like talking about it with him would probably make it worse. I mean, that's just my sense. It's not because I'm not interested. It's just, I feel like he's a very sensitive, very fragile person. So that's why when we're together, I really concentrate on just trying to make him feel cared for, with the hugging and the kissing and, being very gentle. Trust me, I love full on rough, like start spanking me, pull my hair sex. Not all the time, but I enjoy that. And I have not in any way tried to push our encounters in that direction. I just don't feel like it would work. Problem is, like, he can't fuck me. So
I suggest to Ruby that maybe finding out a few unusual or off-the-wall preferences outside normal vanilla sex might help Mankini to have more fun and get some of the pressure off him. Bananas? Bananas, pasting, wiping peanut butter all over your chest, or... You know what I mean? Or something odd, like you coming in dressed as like a high school geography teacher or something like that. You know what I mean?
I think if and when we meet each other again, we have an appointment booked for a month from now, but I have a feeling that, that'll get pushed out or something. The next time we get together, I'm totally going to ask him if he wants me to like show up as a schoolgirl or, whip his bum or something like that. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'll keep you updated.
I just think that aspect of sexuality is so interesting. How the oddest things could sort of bypass that fear and the self-consciousness. Like, I don't know, like how Proust used to talk about the smell of Madeleines. And reminding him of his childhood or something like that. I'm sure there's lots of things like that can turn people on, but they don't know that, or they haven't made the connection. You know what I mean?
Well, this is a perfect segue because I have lots of juicy info to tell you about my times with the Brit.
Who does not have a problem getting it up.
No,
clearly.
definitely not. The man is a machine, which I thoroughly enjoy. And we've really started experimenting a lot. I mean, with stuff that I never thought that I would like. It's not stuff that I had really ever fantasized about, certainly not with another lover. And with him, it's like, holy fuck, like unbelievably good. So,
like what? Butt plugs?
Nope, not butt plugs. I mean, I personally like anal sex, but I asked him about it once and he seems very not into it. So that's fine. That's not a deal breaker for me. No, not butt plugs, bondage. I realized eventually that he's interested in tying me up. So
how did that come up though?
Well, I kept pestering him. I'm like, come on, like you've got to have some kind of fantasy. And he's like, no, not really. I think like his sexual side has been like hectically repressed almost all of his life. And but I just kept kind of digging and poking and asking again. And then finally one day he admitted to me that he does have this thought of tying me up. And I was like, okay, like that sounds awesome. I'd love to try that. So there was a night that I stayed over his house and he tied me down to his bed, like spread eagle, arms stretched out, legs stretched out, tied me to the 4 different posts of his bed, blindfolded me, and I could move a little bit. I mean, it's not like any of these restraints were painful or too tight or anything like that. I could move quite a bit, but I couldn't reach out and touch him. So I didn't know where he was or what he was going to touch next or what kind of touch it would be, whether it was going to be a kiss or a caress or a lick or a what. And it was amazing. It was so tantalizing. I really just enjoyed it so much. It was very cool. And he loved it as well. So we've kind of taken that and just put it up a notch.
I'm sorry, I'm tied to the bed at the moment, so I can't.
Oh, and you say you're so vanilla. I know you're really not. I know you're not. There's a crazy sex goddess just waiting to come out of you. He took a trip, and while he was away, I had this fantasy of him binding my wrists together and like kind of suspending me from the ceiling so that I could just barely touch the floor. Like I had to stand on my tiptoes in order to not be just hanging by my hands. And in my fantasy, he was standing behind me and I could feel the warmth of him and he would spank me. So this is a fantasy, and I tell him about it. I sent him a text message saying, I've had this fantasy, it's so hot. And he's like, I could totally do that. And I said, really? How are you gonna? He's like, no, in my garage. I could totally hang you from the ceiling. So the next time he was back from his trip, he actually, he called it the dungeon, which I think is so awesome. And he walked me back to his garage, blindfolded me before he walked me in the garage. And I couldn't see anything. Like, I couldn't even see the floor. So he really properly blindfolded me. And it was awesome. I mean, he had a heater going in there, so it was nice and warm. And he stripped me naked, bound my wrists, used a rope, tied me up to the ceiling. I mean, exactly the way my fantasy was. Wow. It's what he did. It was incredible. Eventually, he lowered my arms and pushed me over a workbench.
Wow.
And took me from behind like that. My hands were still bound, but that's kind of like, that's where it ended. It was so exciting. And what I didn't realize until after we were both like finished, there were people outside in the street that
What?
I'm sure were hearing me. Because
are you a bit of a screamer? Is that kind of...
Yeah. I mean, listen, if the situation calls for it, I can quell my noises, but I was just letting it rip right out of me. And
but I think one of the most arousing things about that is the preparation, like how much work he's done, how much thought he's put into it.
Yeah, it's so incredibly thoughtful. I was so aroused, Esty. It was insane. The sex was so good. And then eventually, after he whipped me with his belt.
I mean, did you have to talk about, boundaries and safe words for this kind of thing? Because, I mean, if someone gets excited, they might get carried away. For those who don't know what a safe word is, it's a word people use during S&M sex to indicate that they want to stop. Usually it's meant to be something out of the ordinary or bizarre so that it can't be misunderstood. A safe word makes it possible for a submissive to say no or stop and pretend as much as he or she wants without really meaning it, while still having a safe way of indicating that they seriously need the scene to stop.
He didn't do it hard enough to hurt me, and something that I didn't realize at the time, but he told me later. Like, this all happened quite early in the day when I first arrived at his house, before we went out to dinner together and obviously shared a bottle of wine and got a little tipsy. So he told me later the reason that he wanted to do it, like, boom, as soon as I got to his house is because he wanted to make sure he was completely in control of himself. Like, he didn't want to be tipsy or drunk, like, tying me up and whipping me, because just in case, shit got real. We didn't have a safe word for that encounter, but we have since decided that, we've chosen one now. So the next time...
What is it?
Rainbow.
Okay.
Is that funny?
It's just kind of like, every time you look at a rainbow now, you're going to be having... Everyone's going to be, unicorns, Care Bears. You're going to be like, yeah, whips and chains.
Well, I wanted to choose a word that wouldn't ordinarily come out if I'm like begging him to stop. Like your safe
Absolutely
word can't be stop. Yeah, so I mean, that was just incredible. And honestly, it was one of the most fantastic sexual experiences of my life.
So he seems really up to try things. I mean, he had to do a bit of homework for this encounter, He had to do some serious... to go to the
he did.
DIY
But
store.
I need something strong enough to hold the weight of an entire person. Yeah, I'm gonna be suspending her from the ceiling.
And I need some rope and some, a shovel. Do you have lime? So
Well,
that
you know what?
dispose of the body.
Before the first time he tied me up to his bed, I suggested to him that maybe we should visit like, an adult sex shop together and find, because they sell restraints that you can put, like under your mattress and like loop them around and yada, yada, yada. And he was just like, oh, please, I've got more rope than I know what to do with, so don't worry. I'm like, oh, okay.
Is that from his climbing stuff that he
Yeah,
does?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was really cool. He took this trip, as I mentioned, and he hiked to the top of Mont Blanc, which is the highest mountain in Europe. He took our rope with him on this trip, and that was the rope that he used to summit the mountain. And I was like, that's so fucking cool. It's our rope.
The same rope that he's using to summit your mounds.
Ba-dum-bum.
I'm sorry. As long as he doesn't use the crampons and the
Yeah, no. No, the thing is, I'm really not into hectic pain. So I like a little bit of spanking, but if the spanking goes too far, then I'll say no. Oh, okay, we're done there. Like, I'm not into rainbow. And so that's surprising to me because I've never, this is a real journey for me as well in a sexual sense, which is a little bit surprising. I mean, I thought that my sugar daddies would be more like Mankini. Like that was what I was expecting in a sense when I started this journey. Like I thought it was going to be more about the whole like someone's paying me to do something and ooh, that's hot because it's so taboo. I would be happy to just date this guy without him paying me for it.
I'm surprised that you have never tried bondage before, or you and favorite person, because I always sort of saw you as quite sophisticated sexually, I would have thought you'd be like, oh, spanking, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, listen, we've done a little bit of it, but like just really scratching the surface. I have these little silk like ties that, favorite person once tied my hands together. We've blindfolded each other before. I like it when he spanks me, but that's it. It's not like I've ever been full on tied down to a bed or strung up to the ceiling. I mean, that's like...
Wow. I mean, I could see how he might feel a little bit threatened by stuff like this, you know what I mean? Because, he's a dad and he probably doesn't have time to... I can only imagine how awkward it would be, like, to explain to your little kiddies, why is Daddy making the thing in the garage for, is that a fun game that we can all play? I mean...
When you're older, with someone who's not related to you.
So, I mean, I can appreciate how, and especially if you're saying, wow, this is a revelation to me, I never knew about this.
But it's not, as I mentioned before, it's not the sexual aspect of it. It's the fact that I really like the Brit. So, you're commenting on how he obviously takes a lot of time and thought and puts quite a bit of effort into preparing these things for us, for me. And it's not just in a sexual sense. He's away again, by the way. He's not in our city. He's off traveling yet again. He travels a lot. So the last time he was here, we had 2 dates, and then he left again. So the first of those, he planned this amazing evening. It was so incredible. So that was the day that he strung me up to the ceiling. So there was that. And then afterwards, we got ready. We got dressed up. Like he told me, bring a cocktail dress. We're going to be going it was a surprise, so I didn't know what we were doing.
What dress did you wear? Because I know you're this sounds like a frivolous thing to ask about, but, I know your body's changed a lot and stuff. And
yeah, I had a hard time picking one for that exact reason. I brought 2 to the Brit's house, and I let him choose between the two. So one of them is like a really old one that I've had long before I had children, so it still like fit me okay. A strapless kind of gold dress with a velvet ribbon that ties around the middle. And then the other one was a little bit on the big side. The Brit couldn't tell because, I mean, he's kind of a stereotypical man like that, you know, like he's not that into women's clothing. But I mean, I could get away with it. And that was a black tulle, like kind of very poofy, almost looks ballerina-esque, the way the bodice is sweetheart neckline. It's a beautiful dress. And I'm definitely going to have that one altered as well because it needs to be taken in a little bit. But that's the one he chose, the black tulle. So that's the dress that I wore. And I felt sexy, but maybe not 100% sexy because I knew that the dress wasn't fitting me exactly the way it should. But when I said something to him about it, he's like, "Are you kidding me? You look gorgeous. Like, I don't know what you're talking about." So that was good. You know, so I like did my makeup really nice and so on and so forth. And he wore a kilt, which I thought was so cool. And he wore it, quote, properly, which means there wasn't anything on underneath of it.
Swinging in the breeze.
Can imagine what I did to him in the Uber car on the way to the theater. You know what? I didn't actually do anything in the car, but when we finally got to the performance, yeah, like after our first bottle of wine, I totally stuck my hand under his kilt, which made him feel really uncomfortable because we were sitting at a table with another group, you know, it was like 6 people at a table. And you're not necessarily, you know, obviously we were seated with people that we don't know. And so I was facing where the performers were, and I just like reached my hand around backwards because he was kind of sitting, like the way we had to face, he was kind of behind me then. And so I reached under and he was just like, ah! Oh my gosh, yeah, it was so awesome to feel him squirming around. Like he obviously liked what I was doing, but he felt really awkward. It was awesome.
Do you think anyone else at the table was aware of what you're doing?
I don't think so. I was very subtle about it. I don't think so.
So what were you watching?
It was like a dinner theater, almost like a Cirque du Soleil. It was so beautiful, like the way everything in this theater was decorated, and there were all these like kind of crazy actors walking around and interacting with people. There were a bunch of different performances, people doing acrobatics and people like balancing things, and you know, like kind of like circus-esque, I suppose, although there weren't any animals.
And you were having your own
vein.
Performance under the tablecloth.
Yeah, well, that was very brief. So we were served dinner while watching this amazing show. And afterwards, there's a DJ, and the stage, it becomes a dance floor. So we danced. It was such an incredible night, like one of the best dates I've ever been on in my entire life. The Brit took a liking to our waitress who served us dinner and drinks and whatnot. So I propositioned her. I suggested to her that she come back to his house with us. And at first she thought I was kidding. And then I made it very clear that I wasn't kidding. And she was like, "Oh, well, thanks so much. And, you know, would you mind waiting until I get off of my shift?" And we're like, "No, that's fine. Like, we'll just keep dancing." And so we waited for about half an hour, and then she came over to us, and she was obviously, you know, out of uniform and stuff. And she's like, "Listen, I totally want to hang with you guys, but I promised my friends that I would go do XYZ. Like, you're welcome to come with me if you want." And so she was quite sweet. I think this was her way of saying no thank you. And we were like, "Oh, okay, sure. Where is it? Yeah, okay, sure, no problem." And then she walked away, and I turned to the Brit, and I'm like, "I don't really want to go do that." And he's like, "Nah, me either." So, and that was fine. I think that he felt like, holy shit, you're propositioning someone. You know, like that's definitely nothing that he's ever done before. You know, so he didn't say anything the entire time she and I were talking. He was just kind of standing there.
So how did you frame it with her? Did you kind of say, "The Brit really fancies you"? So would you like to, like, you know, in high school, kind of, my friend really likes you. I guess I shouldn't be surprised that Ruby is an expert on this. Here are her tips to picking someone up for a threesome. Use with caution.
You start out by complimenting them like crazy. First, we offered her a glass of our wine, which she accepted. So I thought that that was like a good sign. And then I told her, you know, how gorgeous she is, how sexy she is. We really liked all the different, you know, outfits, because there were several different uniforms, like costumes almost, that the serving staff changed into as the night progressed. You know, I told her like, oh, this looks so good on you. You're so sexy. And she was like, ah, thank you. And then she was really cute. She was very perky and very upbeat, you know, so she was fun to banter with. And then I said, so what do you think about coming home with us? And she was just like, oh, I know, we'd have such a great time, wouldn't we? And I'm like, no, really. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, why don't you come home with us? It'll be such fun. And she was like, oh, wow, okay.
Here's where I rain on her parade. But as the worrywart I am, I can't stop myself. Plus, I really want her to be aware of the potential danger she's putting herself in. A part of me wants to see how she responds. What she's doing, even just with the Brit, could be considered high-risk behavior. I want her to protect herself, and by extension, her other sexual partners, like FP. Recently as well, I just heard that a friend of mine has AIDS, HIV.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty shocking to me to hear that.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I think the likelihood of me contracting an STD from another woman is...
And do you think that's...
really, really, really slight.
Well, that line of questioning didn't really go anywhere. I suppose I'll just have to trust her to look out for herself. And it's probably like he wouldn't want to have a threesome with a guy.
No.
As far as you know.
No, in fact, I was teasing him about that the other day. And he's like, yeah, I have no interest in that. That's not going to happen. Right. And I was like, come on, you don't want to Eiffel Tower me? And he's like, what's that?
What is that?
Oh. Eiffel Towering is when there's a woman in the middle on all fours and a man in front of her and a man behind her doing their thing, and then they high-five each other over her. And the shape that makes is called the Eiffel Tower.
Right. I get it now. I don't know how sound the engineering of that is, but it makes sense to me. Okay.
Well, I'll tell you, I wouldn't want to have tourists climbing up us, but... You know.
I thought that was the whole point. Isn't that what it's all about leading up to? How did he respond afterwards when you went back? Was he like, that was amazing, you know, I'm happy for you to do that, so I'm glad you picked up on my signals? And
I asked him first, like, because he mentioned a couple times, like, how cute she is, and the last uniform that they had to wear, it was like this very provocative, like, zipper shirt, you know, so she showed a lot of cleavage, and he kept saying to me, like, oh, I'd just love to reach forward and pull that zipper down, you know? So I asked him, I was like, do you want me to invite her back to your house? And he's like, really? You would do that? And I'm like, of course I would. He's like, yeah, go ahead. Let's see what she says.
Do you think there was an element of him kind of testing you at the limits of your arrangement?
He knows that I like women. He knows that I'm bisexual. We've spoken about it before. In fact, I've told him that I'd love to have a threesome with him. I've told him I'd love to see him fuck another woman. You know, so that's already out there. So absolutely not. Like, I see what you're saying. And maybe with another person who is a bit more insecure about how he and I interact, like maybe that would be their motivation. It's not like that's unreasonable to think, but that definitely wasn't where the Brit was coming from.
Right.
And I'll tell you something else. I am absolutely certain that if he thought for one moment that I didn't want him to look at another woman or talk about other ladies that he finds attractive, like if he thought that I didn't like that, then he wouldn't do it. He is so solicitous of me.
We hadn't covered your bisexuality in the podcast.
I've never said that before?
Yeah,
really?
No.
I suppose that could be a bit of a bombshell. And I'm just like saying it here like, oh yeah, everybody knows.
Oh yeah, by the way.
Right. I guess I should have prepared you for that one.
Ruby's bisexuality is one of the things that she told me about fairly early on in our friendship. In fact, Ruby and FP used to go to strip clubs together. It was a thing with them, part of their kink and Ruby's bisexuality.
It's good to clarify, the way it works between you, and the fact that you have had these discussions with him, and so that was the first date after he got back, after you hadn't seen him for a month.
Yeah, it was probably about 3 weeks that I hadn't seen him. Yeah, so we had the dungeon. We had this wonderful dinner theater experience that was just such fun. And, I had to get dressed up for it, which is fun in and of itself. I love getting dressed up and looking pretty. And then afterwards, we went back to his house and we just fucked like crazy.
You've had a couple of dates since then. Do you miss him when he's away? Is it quite?
I do. Given the date that I just described, like how could I not miss spending time with someone who's that thoughtful and that good in the sack?
We're talking about religion and sexuality and how that's led to where you are and how you are. I know that, like myself, you were brought up Catholic.
Yes, I was baptized Catholic as an infant, and I studied my catechism until the age of about 12. And just before my confirmation, I decided that I was going to stop doing it.
Right. What led to that decision?
I didn't feel as if I was learning anything that spoke to me. In retrospect, I feel like this has absolutely everything to do with the particular teachers that I had. So I've always been an inquisitive person. I was a very inquisitive child. I was somewhat precocious. I was a very good reader. So I would often, read ahead in the various little workbooks that they would give us. And I'd ask questions that they didn't know how to answer. And I never felt like I was getting good information, I suppose you could say.
Yeah.
I've always questioned authority. Just because someone who's older than me was telling me, well, this is how it is, I was never the kind of kid who would just blindly accept that. I was the kind of kid who would go, oh, really? Why? Why is it like that? Are you sure?
That's a common problem. I know that my husband as well, that was his problem. He would be asking questions when he had religious studies at school. And instead of being told, well, that's an interesting question, and feeling that the religion is actually strengthened by being challenged, which I think is always a sign of someone who is very enlightened. I always admire people very much, religious people who are prepared to have their views challenged, because that shows to me that they are not afraid that their faith is strong enough to withstand a few questions. Whereas
absolutely,
a lot of times people are shut down, are made to feel shamed because they're asking a simple question, and I think that's where a lot of people lose faith in whatever it is. Maybe not their faith in God, but perhaps they stop going along the route of organized religion.
Well, I've never really felt the presence of God, and I'm using the word God very deliberately because I am referring to the Western patriarchal father in the sky who, knows everything you're doing and watches you all the time and blah, 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 blah. I don't think of divinity as personified. I didn't have the language when I was a child to discuss that. I just felt like I was reading stories, the Bible stories. I could have been reading any other child's book. It never felt like these things were real. So I decided to stop studying Catholicism, which greatly upset my grandparents. I mean, the whole reason that I had been baptized and going to church on Sunday and going to CCD is because my father's parents are big time Roman Catholics. So they were the ones who would take me to church on Sunday. And my parents divorced when I was young. My mom has gone on this very kind of weird religious journey. So for many, many years, she actually was a Jehovah's Witness, and she would make us study, us being myself and my younger siblings. she would make us have Bible study with a Jehovah's Witness in the middle of the week. After school, I would have to have Bible study with this Jehovah's Witness girl. So there were years during which I would have Jehovah's Witness Bible study on a Wednesday, and then on Sunday, my grandparents would come and pick us up and bring us to church. Technically speaking, both Catholics and Jehovah's Witnesses are under the umbrella of Christianity. That being said, you really can't get much different between being a Jehovah's Witness and a Catholic. They're like on huge spectrums on either side of the umbrella of Christianity. So
yeah, Catholicism's got all that vampiric stuff and
yeah, lots of vampire werewolves. No, you know what it has? It has ritual. It has a lot of symbolism and ritual, and obviously all the saints.
The priest has that handbag that he waves that's always on fire.
And all that stuff, those are things that Jehovah's Witnesses believe that stuff is evil.
Right.
You know, like
so
the
that
whole
must have been really confusing for you, to have this sort of pomp and ceremony on the one side, and sort of saying this is how we honor our faith with all of these, and replications of Mary and all the saints and all of that iconography. And then on the other side, you're having to go on a Wednesday and learn about how all of that is totally evil.
Totally evil. I mean, to the point where a true Jehovah's Witness doesn't even celebrate their own birthday.
Or go to hospitals. Is that right? They can't go to blood transfusions or something?
They can't have blood transfusions. I mean, there's like all these like crazy rules because they're worried about the idolatry of it.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, and like idols are just prolific within the Catholic faith. So at the time, I did find it confusing, and maybe even more than confusing, I found it irritating because I thought everybody was full of shit.
But
I would ask questions.
I mean, no wonder. If you're a child and you've been giving these completely polarized points of view, how on earth could you...
How do you come out of that thinking, oh, this is the right way and that's the wrong way? Well, I didn't. I just looked at everybody and I'm like, you full of shit, and you full of shit, and you full of shit, and you full of shit. So it was at the time I was about 13. I stopped studying Catholicism, and I also stopped the whole Jehovah's Witness thing. I told my grandparents and my mother, it's like, listen, you can punish me if you want, but I'm not doing this anymore. I don't believe in it. It doesn't speak to me. I'm done. And they were all really angry with me, but nothing ever happened. I mean, what could they do? They couldn't force me to do it, So I, just on my own, I started reading about Buddhism. It was way back when that I got into Zen Buddhism. So that's something that has stayed with me since then. I don't know if I would call myself a Buddhist. I'm not like a strict practicing Buddhist, but the underlying tenets of that discipline, I'm not even going to call it a faith for me. It's really kind of a way of organizing your mind and letting go of things, being very emotionally disciplined. That's how I look at what I've learned from Buddhism. And that's really helpful. It's helped me a lot in my life.
I know that from my experience of being brought up Catholic, it gave me some wonderful things because it opened me up to faith and God.
Here's where I go for my little spiel about what I think God is. I recently saw a college humor skit called The Church for People Who Are Spiritual, Not Religious, where embarrassingly the dialogue was pretty much exactly what I'm spouting now. Turn away.
I don't believe, as you don't either, in the sort of guy with a big white beard sitting on a cloud, but I do believe in God. I believe in a presence. I believe in this sense thing that binds us all, spiritually. And I can't really put that into words.
Because it's transcendent. That's the whole... If you could explain it, it wouldn't be divinity.
Having been brought up Catholic as well, one of the things that wasn't so positive is that I feel a lot of guilt and shame for the most random things you feel extremely guilty about. And obviously sex being one of them. Sex is very taboo, very kind of like, you're not really... The idea of enjoying sex is like a no-no. It's kind of just obviously after marriage, and even then it's kind of like, don't enjoy it. Just
don't look them in the eye.
Lie back, think of England or whatever, and You just...
God save the queen.
I'm just wondering if anything like that kind of
Hmm.
informed your sexuality.
Yeah, it's a great question because what you're saying, I think, is almost a universal experience for people who are Catholic, that sense of overwhelming guilt. And you know what, SD, I don't know why. Maybe it was because I stopped studying when I was young enough. Probably it's just because I'm the kind of person I am. I've never felt guilty about sex, ever. Yeah, that shame, that feeling of like, ooh, I shouldn't be enjoying this. No. In essence, I'm probably just a total fucking hedonist. You know?
Oh. I was kind of counting on being able to delve into the shame and guilt treasure trove most ex and current Catholics carry around with them. That's taken the wind out of my sails a bit. Just kidding. But a part of me wonders if she's rebelling a little bit. Like so many of us do. I mean, I was technically living in sin with my husband for 8 years before we got married. And her choices now are certainly diametrically opposed to those preached in the Catholic faith. Then she asked me a question to which there is only one answer. Hell yes.
Should I tell you about my first time?
Yeah, why not?
Having full-on sex. It was actually really wonderful. So I was 16, almost 17. I remember it was just a couple of weeks until my birthday. We went for a picnic together in this national park near the high school that we both attended. He was a year older than me, so he was already 17. And it was just such fun. You know, we laid the blanket out. We were like deep in the woods, so there was definitely nobody else around. We laid this blanket out and we had sandwiches and fruit.
For some reason, I'm picturing Brian from My So-Called Life. Remember, with the young Claire Danes? God, I loved that show when I was a teen.
It's not like we went there with the intention of like, okay, now we're going to have sex. We just started kissing each other and holding each other, and one thing led to another, and boop, there you go. he was in.
Sorry, I thought that called for a record scratch. Did she say boop? Poor Brian.
I remember it hurting a little bit, not as much as I thought it was going to be, because that was something that a friend of mine had like spoken about a lot. She had recently lost her virginity, and she was saying like how she bled so much and it was really painful. So I was like, oh, you know, this doesn't actually sound very appealing. There was a little bit of blood on him, and when we were finished, you know, he sat up and he was like, oh, are you okay? Like, I didn't actually ask you, like, I just went with, you seem to be going with, like, he was so nervous, you know, it was weird. He was kind of like nervous after the fact. And I was like, no, I'm fine. That was wonderful. I mean, why don't we do it again? You know? So, it was lovely. I mean, and he was such a good person. I really, really loved him. So my first encounter was it was beautiful.
I know you say that you've never had any kind of feelings of shame around it, but I'm just interested as to how you managed to avoid that, you know, the sort of...
You know what? I think it's just because sex has never felt like a dirty thing to me. And anybody who tries to tell me that it's a dirty thing, I feel like they have their issues. They have their own issues. Like I've never taken that message from anybody and taken it on board for myself. Right. I hear someone say that and I immediately know, well, that's their problem. That's not my problem. And I think that that's the confusion that so many people, you know, especially when you're a child. I mean, fair enough, right? I'm not saying that, you know, a person such as yourself, SD, who has these feelings of shame and guilt. I mean, you were taught that.
It's hammered into you that it's bad and evil, and even though mentally I was like, I don't think that's true.
Can you hear that?
Yeah, I can hear.
I'm so sorry. Hold on. I think she's moving away from the door. Okay. Oh, I feel bad. Did you hear her?
Yeah, no, I think we're just about done anyway. Probably haven't delved into this as deeply as we could have, but...
Something that I do want to say, I do feel as if being with someone physically is I don't want to use the word religious act. It's a spiritual act. You're giving yourself to someone else, and they're giving themselves to you. So I really believe that having sex with someone, especially if it's someone that you care about and you're very comfortable with them, I think that that is the way in which I touch the divine more than anything else, with the exception of interacting with my children. For me, it actually is like, this is the big thing that I wanted to say and why I was quite excited about an episode on religion, because I feel like it is a huge part of my spirituality, is having sex. It's a big thing for me. And that's one of the reasons why I feel like there's no way I could feel ashamed of this or feel like it's a bad thing. This is how I touch the divine, that kind of physical union with someone.
It's fascinating to hear Ruby describe her sexuality in these terms, especially when so many people would stigmatize what she's doing as being about as far from divine as you can get.
So, for instance, the day that the Brit brought me into his dungeon, I mean, the sex was so good. It was so insanely good. My body felt like it was on fire. And we came at the same time, at the very end. Like, he's very good at timing it like that, which I think is an excellent skill to have. Like, I genuinely didn't know, like, where did my body end and where did his begin? Like, there's a split second of just total, like, wah, you know? Like, you're almost outside of yourself.
So there you have it, folks. The divine sounds like wah.
I'll let her finish on a more scientific note.
I'm sure I didn't go from kissing a boy straight to jumping in the sack. You know how in evolution, there's like the missing link. It goes from the ape to the Homo sapien. And they're like, yeah. Okay, so there's some guy out there who is my missing link.
It's clear that Ruby sees sex as her way to get closer to some greater spiritual force. That she wants to share that experience with more than one person is, some may say, simply an extension of this pliability of mind. Religion puts boundaries and rules on this intimacy. And while I don't agree with ever feeling shameful about something that is natural, the deep grooves that my religious upbringing has worn into my brain make me feel uneasy about sharing sex with more than one person. But those are my hang-ups. Ruby doesn't subscribe to any one religious sect. Perhaps she's making her own religion. Anyone else care to join? Found something thought-provoking in one of our episodes you'd like to share? Maybe you have some questions for Ruby. If we get enough, we might create some bonus content with Ruby answering the best ones. Email us here, fablegazers@gmail.com. If you'd like to tweet us, we're at @fable_gazers, or take a peek at our lovely Instagram account, where you'll find awesome cartoon representations of Ruby, FP, Madeline, the Marquis, and the Brit, all done by my amazing mother, Kathy Jewson, who is an artist. We're Fablegazers, one word. Rating, reviewing, and subscribing is very much appreciated as ever and helps to keep us going. Names and details have been changed to protect the anonymity of those involved. This has been a Fablegazers production.